Hello everyone, this is Sam here from Audio Science Review. I posted a video on the Duke Audio A5 stereo amplifier a couple days ago, and I commented in there that even though it allows you to replace the op-amps, there's no reason to do that. I got at least half a dozen comments asking, oh really, is that true? And can you test that? So even though I've done that kind of testing before, I thought, well, I should go ahead and test it in this context since the question is fresh. So the Duke A5 makes it easy because it's got this little panel. You could just remove that. And inside it, there is these little ICs over here, these 8-pin dips, we call them. And I've replaced it with this giant module. Believe it or not, this does the same thing as that little IC does. And I've got the little IC taken out. This is a Texas Instrument IC. It's a NE5532P. It retails for about 57 cents each. And there are two op-amps in there. You need two of them. And on the other hand, this large module is a discrete part by a company called Sonic Imagery. And the lowest price I found on this is $47, so about 100 times more expensive. It's pain in the neck to fit it in there because it's really too large to stick it in there. And if you're going to do this, you want to, get the IC-based op-amps like the one that I took out, and there are a number of upgrades you can buy. They're similar size. So, but people had asked for these large discrete op-amps, and a lot of people go spend money on these things. And so I thought I'd get it in there. And after bending these capacitors really more than I was comfortable bending, luckily I didn't break their pins. I managed to stick one in one of the channels, and I left the other channel alone. That way we can compare the two channels instantly at the operating temperature and conditions of the op-amps. So let's switch to the write-up that I just posted on Audio Science Review. So again, these are this is the stock part over here. Let me make sure you can see my mouse. This is the stock part over here, and this is the Sonic Imagery op-amp over here. Now, I could have done a test where I measured everything with the original IC and then pulled out the op-amps and plug in the new one. The problem is that these power amps are temperature sensitive, and by the time you go through and replace a part and come back, the maybe running at different temperatures, and you see more variations. By leaving one channel the same and replacing the other channel allows me to simultaneously test both of them. Now, that's not without its problems because this is not a precision instrument, so channel 1 and channel 2 or left and right are not 1000% precise, although surprisingly they were pretty close. So you'll see that in the measurements. If you want to know more of a close-up of this IC, this is what it looks like. And if I go to their page, you can see a write-up and description, and that's where that picture came from. It's got their spec down here and so forth, and on this thing. So let's go back to I'll go back to that one in a second. So again, the comparisons against these two, I have a bunch of other op-amps, but I couldn't find them. And I think if we could show the difference between, something that's 100 times more expensive is more meaningful than going through a bunch of similar parts. So as I just wanted to show, I've done this testing before. This is a Topping D10 that came out, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And it too had a replaceable op-amp over here that's used as a buffer. And I was able to swap that. And at that time, I actually had a bunch of op-amps to test, including the one, this Sonic Foundry one, Sonic Imagery one. And I went through testing all of these Muse parts and National Instrument, this LM parts and so forth. And the story is like this, where basically at lower noise levels and distortion, it makes absolutely no difference. If you push at higher frequencies where distortion does set in, we can see that there's a slight gap in here with this, the standard part that Topping put in there, this OPA 2134 actually was the lowest noise and best performing, if you cared while it was getting distorted, but it really is not something that you want to care about. I've done similar testing with Hypex power amplifiers that many vendors, when they sell them, they give you the option of putting Sparkos at this Sonic Imagery, just give you the op-amps in there, and I've shown that there's no difference there either. But let's do our own testing again, fresh with this Duke amplifier. So for the purpose of this instrumentation, I'm running my standard dashboard, 1 kHz tone. These are all the unwanted things. These are the harmonic distortions and power supply noise and what have you. Channel 1 is the stock part that's in there, the NE5532 op amp. And then this is the sonic imagery, and I won't even try to read this thing. 994 enhanced teacher. I guess that's what they say. We can see that the cyanide is essentially identical, surprisingly identical, given the fact that there can be channel-to-channel differences. And the gain is very much the same. That means the gain has not changed, which is a good thing. Sometimes these things can modify the gain, and if it does, it might be louder or less loud, and that can impact the subjective impression of those things. So this basically shows that with 1 kHz tone at least, and summing the entire spectrum of audible band, it makes no difference. But that's at one power level and one input level to the op amp. So I decided to do a power sweep. This basically changes the amount of voltage that we're injecting into that front end IC. And so it's testing across a bunch of conditions. And here we see that there's essentially no difference. There's a tiny bit of gap in here, maybe half a dB or 1 dB in here at the extreme, but that could just be channel-to-channel variation. There's just no way to know. Even if it wasn't that, the 1 dB is just not going to be anything that matters. At 91 or 90 is basically the same number. So it makes no difference. Now, by now, somebody would say, well, these are all 1 kHz. How about other frequencies? So this is a test that I normally run on amplifiers where I sweep from 15 kHz all the way down to 20 Hz. Normally, I only show one channel, which is a solid line. But I went ahead and turned on the second channel, and the second channel is shown as dashed lines. And here we see that at 15 kHz, the sonic imagery actually produced more distortion and noise, more noise, but a little bit less distortion than a little bit more. But I think that may have been a fluke on the first run because, well, maybe not. We can see the difference here is sort of somewhat consistent, but then it becomes the same. But at the lowest levels, it actually has more noise at lower frequencies than these. But a high-level picture really is, we're literally zooming in the noise. There is really no meaningful difference in here at all. Now, before somebody says, you can't measure the differences, so your measurements are no good. Well, we are showing differences. And I went ahead and zoomed into that with high-level magnification and look at the spectrum. And we can see in here at 1 kHz tone, that the first tone is obviously the same. Second harmonic, the stock part just has a hair more distortion, but the dominant third harmonic is identical in the two channels, and nothing is different till you maybe get down here. And actually, at 7 kHz, the seventh harmonic, the stock part actually has less distortion. Then it has more distortion here at 8, and it varies. And with the highest harmonics, looks like the discrete part is better. But the levels of these things at minus 100, minus 120 dBs, these are all, at or below threshold of hearing, especially these high frequency ones. Our hearing threshold shoots up at higher frequencies. So none of this is audible. And at any rate, they would be masked with this dominant second harmonic anyway. So definitely no difference. If we test at 100 Hertz, where I saw that the discrete part was a little bit worse, we can see that the red spikes in here actually are taller with the discrete part. Again, this could just be channel-to-channel variation, especially these are power supply noise and what have you. And so, the only logical conclusion is that even though we can measure minute differences well below threshold of hearing, that these parts are really, really, really the same. Now, obviously, to somebody who's not an engineer and doesn't understand the details of electronic design, it's just shocking that, if I go back to my picture, that this giant part that costs so much more money wouldn't be any better than this little part. And the question is, why isn't it better? Well, part of the reason these little parts are good is because they made it with processes that allows very high-level optimization. You can actually create semiconductor devices that don't exist as discrete parts, for example, Also the parts are the circuit components are very, very close together. In some higher end parts, they can be laser trimmed and they can be tuned to be extremely precise. And so in theory, they have an advantage. And of course, mass production means they're very, very cheap. If you have to build this using discrete parts, it could actually cost more than this. Some of these may have 40, 50, 100 transistors and parts in them. So they're quite sophisticated, but the circuits are tiny, so we can put them all in a small package using automated machinery, can produce these things very, very cheaply. And now it's not perfect. If one part of this IC started to get hot, you can actually raise the temperature of the rest of the IC also, and for example, degrade this noise performance. So if this was a power amplifier, the rise in temperature in one part of it would actually reduce the impact on the other one. That's why we tend to have power amplifiers that are discrete circuits. This example notwithstanding, this actually uses an IC Class D amplifier. But many times we use ICs as the front end where there's no heat impact, and then the final stages would be discrete parts. Discrete parts can have higher current capabilities, they can have higher voltage capabilities, and they can do things that you may not be able to buy in an integrated circuit. Now, the key thing in here is that we don't use these ICs as is. We don't just take the IC in and feed it an input and get larger output. We take a sample of the output and compare it to the input, and we correct for errors. So if the output doesn't match the input, we modify the circuit itself self-modifies its transfer function and actually produces a more correct signal. This is called a feedback. When we apply feedback, even if the two op-amps or two components have wildly different response as far as their nonlinearities, the feedback mechanism powerfully nulls that out. And when it does, the two products become similar. It's like you can get two employees working at the company, very different people, but they can produce the same output. If there's a feedback mechanism on quality of the work that they're doing, they can produce the same outcome. Same thing is true over here. And that's the main reason that you notice that there's hardly any difference between these. In the DAC test, for example, there's a bunch of different ICs. The internal architecture is very different. But ultimately, the feedback mechanism linearizes these circuits and renders the differences as being moot. Now, of course, retort comes right back that, I've switched them and there was a big difference, and Joe Reviewer has done them, and he says the sound is so much better. Well, those tests are simply not valid. You can't take an amplifier, listen to it, say, okay, it sounds like X. Then you turn it off, take all the parts out, put the new one in. Half hour later, you turn it back on, and you say, wow, there's got blacker backgrounds, the bass is tighter, and all that stuff. That usually happens because your frame of mind changes, as I've explained many times. You start to focus, you start to pay attention, you now hear instruments or notes you didn't hear before because you weren't paying attention the first time around. And even if you expect the sound to be worse, by the way, you will hear actually the sound is improved because you're paying attention, you're focusing, you listen to faint sounds in the background, and that makes you think that, wow, the sound is improved. If we build two amplifiers and put them behind a curtain and do an A/B switch where you don't know if the product has been switched or switched not, it definitely, I guarantee you will not be able to hear the differences because larger differences than this are inaudible, let alone what we're seeing in here. So, there's no evidence there, and 100 people saying that they've done these upgrades and it sounded better to them is 100 times zero. It's still the value is zero because they're not doing a simple, proper test of a controlled instrument. This amplifier is cheap enough. If you want to do that, go ahead, buy two of them. Only cost you $200. Put expensive op-amps or different ones in one versus the other. And have a loved one or a friend switch it between them randomly, sometimes not switching, sometimes switching. Repeat it a dozen times if you get 10 out of 12 right. And then we have something to talk about. Until then, I guarantee you there's a reason we don't jump and keep using $50, $60 op-amps in these designs. Okay, so hopefully you've learned something in here and now have an evidence to take somebody who tries to convince you to spend $50 per channel. By the way, two of these would be $100, or as much as the cost of the amplifier itself. So you don't really want to do this, okay? Talk to you later. See you in a future video. Bye-bye.